we're going to begin with our webinar now. So thank you everyone for coming to our webinar today. We're going to be having an introduction to indie game development panel with 3 of our speakers. So with that said, Marcus, do you want to give an introduction?
Yep. All right. So I am Marcus. I'm president of our school's Future Business Leaders America Club. So we are a business-oriented club, which means we aim to provide opportunities to prepare our members for future business careers. This can be done through various competitions where you go in and you get to meet up with a lot more people in the business field, and it's just great exposure for our members. We're now sitting around 23 members. One of our most recent competition was the Southern Section Leadership Conference, where a couple of us placed for state. And that's a little overview about our club.
Okay, thank you. And to introduce Bread Pandas, we're first year FTC team, which is essentially like an international robotics competition where we compete in a game and build a robot to compete in that game. And currently we have 13 members, all from FEHS. And this past season, we were able to win first place design award at the interleague tournament, and we've also participated in the state championships. Our goal for this year is to increase access to STEM and robotics within our communities and connect with other people in our field.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, is someone's microphone on?
Well, it's kind of covering what you're saying. Sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. So to give introduction to our agenda, we're going to begin with giving some speaker intros, and we're going to have some showcases for the games and designs that our speakers have made. And then we're going to be giving a very short little introduction to what indie game development is for anyone who might not already know what it is. And then we're going to move on to our panel section, and then we're going to have a little Q&A session at the end. And then some things you guys are going to learn from this panel is kind of understanding the field of indie game development in general and what it is, as well as what it's like to make games, make the concept behind games, and kind of like develop that idea behind a game, how to get started in the industry, how to make a game stand out, and then, so with that said, I'll hand it off to our first speaker, Jenny, to give a little introduction to herself.
Hi everyone, my name here is Yejin, but you can call me Jeannie. I'm currently a UX designer at Blizzard Entertainment, and I recently graduated from UCLA with a degree in cognitive science and a computing specialization. And for the past 4 years, I've been pursuing my passion of indie game development. This is just an example of a game that we made for Ludum Dare, which is an online game jam. It is called Barely Fitting, and it's a farming puzzle game. For this game, I was the project manager, designer, supporting artist. And we actually won 77th place, which was in the 90th percentile for the overall game jam. So yeah, this is one of my more recent projects. These are just some screenshots. The one on the left is a little comic strip that we made in the beginning of the game to kind of like set the scene and the vibes. The image on the right is we actually prototyped the game in Figma and created the levels that way to test their difficulty and make sure that they were scaling properly. And then in the bottom screenshot here, we decided to add in some rules to kind of increase the difficulty of the game and also just make it a little bit more interesting. So yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Geneva Hayward. I graduated last year from NYU's Game Center, and I graduated from Art and Design in 2018 since I originally wanted to be an animator, but grew to find my love for game development. And I've previously worked at 3 different studios: Glow Up Games, Variable Joy, and New Challenger, which was the last studio I was working at. And for the past couple of years, I've been working on and off on my own independent project called Skate and Date, which I've showcased at multiple places, and also it had got nominated for an Indicate Award in 2019 for its narrative design. So Skate and Date is basically this roller derby rhythm game. I originally made it to be like a portfolio piece in 2017 when I was getting ready to start applying for colleges. And then I eventually decided to be like, oh, the after school program I was going to in New York usually had their seniors create Kickstarter games. And so it was fully funded on Kickstarter. And I was like, okay, I'm going to solo develop this. I'm going to make this myself. But it took very long, and so now it's set to release this year after I've finally finished college and I finally have more time for it. So basically, it's kind of like this mashup of visual novels, which you can see on the top left, where you have this section where you're just talking to characters and you eventually have like options, but also a rhythm game, which is on the right. And the thing that's different about this game is that you are like in the rhythm game section, you can kind of change the main character's personality by how you play, whether you're going against like these roller derby people, like sorry, getting confused with my words today. Whether you're like avoiding the roller derby people that you're going against, which they're called blockers, or you're going straight at them to be more aggressive, making the character more aggressive with her options and with her like confidence. But the game also has like a free play mode, which most rhythm games have.
All right. Hi. So yeah, I worked on publishing this game called Ricochet Ranger. I started off as a total beginner. So when I first started the project, I mean, it was very like it creeped a lot. So like it was supposed to be a 1 week project. I was like, yeah, let me just make a game in a week and see how it goes. And ended up I just enjoyed the project a lot, and I ended up continuing on it for 2 years, and ended up publishing it on Steam and all that. And yeah, it's all for me. I guess the music and some of the visuals are made by other artists, but in terms of like the game being put together is all by me. And I also made all of the art as well. And yeah. So here are some pictures of the game. So it's sort of like an arena shooter game, and sort of the twist is that you only have one bullet. So there are a couple different gifts here, but if you look at the top left, you can kind of see how it works. So you can shoot a bullet and it'll bounce off of things, and you can reflect it into enemies. I went for like sort of like a pixel art type of style, kind of abstract, because it's a lot easier to do art for that. Yeah, art is hard. I've tried to do some animations and stuff, and Geneva, I can understand why you didn't do animation. I don't know, it's so much time. It's so much time. So yeah, on the top right, you can see that things get a little bit more complicated as you go to different levels and things like that. There are lots of different enemies, lots of different items and things like that. You know, and you know, starting off as a complete beginner, not everything always like worked out the way it was planned. I wanted this game to be very like focused on speedrunning, since that's something that I do, which is like when you try to beat a video game as fast as possible. So I included tools for that as well, like being able to track your times and your like they're called splits. I don't know if people do sports like swimming. I think they're sort of similar thing. But on the bottom left, you can just see like things don't always go according to plan, and so there's some visual bugs that would happen sometimes while working on stuff. But yeah, and then on the bottom right is sort of the speedrun leaderboards for the game. Usually the game takes about for a new person, maybe like 30 minutes to an hour to complete, but you can speedrun it in under 5 minutes or under 6 minutes. It was interesting getting it. Oh, thank you, Jeannie. It was really interesting getting it on Steam. Well, okay, so I had to get on Steam, and then also it was interesting trying to do all the stuff like getting it recognized by YouTube and Twitch and stuff like that. And I don't know what I submitted it to, but I must have submitted it to one of the like game archive things, because it just started getting like put on everything. So like there are websites that have my game that I don't even know about. So I was like Googling it, and there's like it's on some Razer site and some Video Game Insights website or something. And so the game started getting like put on all these websites, which I thought was kind of interesting. One thing that I will recommend to anyone who wants to submit stuff to Steam, they ask you for an email. Put like a burner email, because you'll get a lot of spam mail. I don't know what's up with it, but there's this weird thing where like people will say like, oh, hey, I'm a game reviewer. I'm going to review your game. Give me a free like code or something for the game. But like, it's like a lot. Like I put a different email and it's like flooded with those things. So just FYI for anyone who wants to put stuff on Steam. Yeah, I guess next slide. And anyone who wants to know more details, here are some links and things like that. And so if you're interested in seeing that process more in depth, feel free to check out my YouTube channel as well.
Okay, so before we go to our Q&A session, I'm gonna give like a little introduction to what indie game development is like. So who are indie game developers? An indie game developer is someone who creates games without the financial backing from a large corporation. So this could be like, as Geneva said, Kickstarter. And then an indie game developer or indie game developers have always been in the industry, but they began rising in popularity after gaming platforms such as Steam and Xbox Live Arcade gave inspiring hobbyists the opportunity to sell their games without a publisher. And so there are two types of indie game developers you can become. You can become a solo developer, like how Notch did when he made Minecraft. And the pros of this is that you have complete control over your game and how you want it. But that can also be a negative because you have to work on the art, the music, the sound, and the programming and the level design. So it can be a lot of work. And then you can also work for an indie game team or publisher. An example of this would be Relogic, the creators of Terraria. And the pros is that you work on essentially what you want to work on and what you're good at. But the cons is that because everyone's on a team, there are deadlines, and then you also need a lot of collaboration and communication skills. And then trends in the indie game market. For the past decade, a lot of retro-inspired like pixel art games, like the one that Joshua made, have been like really popular. And this is because a lot of indie game developers grew up on like Mario and Mega Man and stuff like that. And then multiplayer indie games have also been seeing a lot of success. There's Rocket League, there's Raft, there's Overcooked, and then there's Valheim, and then Among Us, I guess.
All right, so I will begin the panel question and answer section. So essentially how this will go is we will have questions displayed on the screen, and I will welcome any speaker is welcome to answer. So feel free to speak up. The stage is yours. All right, we can continue. So for the first question is, what are the most challenging issues of your job and how do you solve these issues? Again, you guys are all welcome to answer this question.
Well, I guess for my job specifically, just because I've mainly been a Unity contract programmer, is bug fixing. Lots of bug fixing, lots of working with plugins and strange things that don't make sense. Like with the first studio I worked at, I was helping a lot with their character creator. And for some reason, like the plugin we were using kept making all of the parts of like the face just like disappear, making it very scary. And the way to really solve it is just like a lot of collaboration, a lot of Googling, and a lot of like sitting and talking with people to try and figure out what's going wrong. Because like sometimes there will be just like a very small thing like, oh, I forgot to take out this line of code, or oh, I forgot to set this setting or reset a thing. Sometimes it can be very simple or very hard, but I think just communicating and making sure you have collaborators or just people to run things by can be very helpful.
Thank you so much. Was there anyone else who would like to answer this question?
Yeah, I can add in. I was going to say for me, I think scalability was definitely something. I think maybe just because I was starting off as a total beginner, but as I developed the project, and the game is supposed to be 1 week long. Don't like if you have a 1 week long project, do not make it last 2 years, because that's bad. Because yeah, things were not coded to be scalable at all because it was not supposed to be a long project, and so it was just like weird. The way I was coding things was kind of weird, and like that, like other things were built on top of that, and it just became a huge mess. And so once I wanted to start adding more complicated things into the game, like lots of different items and different stages and things, it got to be quite complicated. So I would say it's important to think about scalability with your code. And if you don't know, it's hard because when you first start off, you might not know what you want to put in the game, just because I feel like the game usually evolves over time in terms of like features you want to add. But I think that once you feel like there's a pattern of like, oh, I need to add multiple items or something, definitely consider making things like with scalability in mind, because I think that's something that's quite can take a lot of time later on.
How important is it to network and collaborate with other developers or other designers throughout your journey?
Well, I'd say it's like very, very important because like specifically like I got to go to GDC last week for the first time, which was very cool. And a lot of developers who were telling me like their journey into game development, they're always like, oh, well, it was out of luck. Like I met the right person at the right time and things like that. Which is not the only way to get into the industry, of course, but it's good to know people who will have your back. Also, like there's a lot of nice people. There's a lot of nice people who are just ready to like help and give resources at GDC specifically. Um, and I feel like specifically in New York, there's a lot of game development groups, but I know there's a lot on the West Coast as well who can like help with whatever design needs that you have or like play testing. Like there's a lot of like play testing groups in New York. I'm hopefully sure that there's a lot in California as well. Because like especially when it comes to like working on an independent game and wanting to get yourself out there or to improve how you think about games and how you make games, I think getting advice from others can be very helpful. And it's like sometimes you might not get good advice, and that's okay too. But it's good to have people you can rely on and that people that can like come to you as well.
All right. Well, I guess I'll go. So I would say that for me, I think it depends on sort of what kind of person you are. For me personally, I'm very like sort of like a solo kind of person. I think that for me personally, it's just easier to just do everything myself because don't have to like manage anything, just figure it out. And Google is always your friend. I think that if there's some things that you can't do for your game that you want to have implemented into your game, then that's a good time to try to reach out to people. Like when I was looking for music for the game, music design is something I want to get into, but it's not something that I do currently. And so I reached out to different artists and stuff and try to see, how we work something out and try to get some music into my game. And same thing with the art. I think independent game development is definitely like a jack of all trades kind of profession for sure, depending on, if you're with a team or not. And so things like art, again, reached out to some artists and so I found that helpful, but also it helps if you're able to do some stuff on your own. Like some things I couldn't find artists that were able to like do things in the way that I wanted them to. So I would just make the art myself. So for me personally, I don't collaborate a whole lot, but I think that if you want to work that way, then it can absolutely work. And for larger scale projects, I think it can be really good as well.
I'm someone who definitely prefers collaborative teamwork over working by myself, and I think that's only something I discovered after doing school projects and game jams. So I would first recommend figuring out what you prefer. There are merits and downsides to both. But I prefer working in teams. So for me, it's been incredibly important throughout my journey. The people that I know have been great sources of motivation, inspiration, like help with my projects, and also moral support, which is very important. It's easier to kind of like keep yourself accountable to do work when there's somebody else that's like depending on you and vice versa, rather than when you're kind of by yourself. That's what I found personally. So yeah, it's important. It's important based on what kind of person you are. But even beyond that, just like making sure you're getting to like expand your network and you at least have a few people in the industry that you know can also be great, because it's always good to just have a few people under your belt. So yeah, I would say it's been very important to my personal journey.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so I think the final question is, what is something that's overlooked or like an overlooked piece of advice you would give anyone who's interested in going into your field?
I think that for me, it's sort of similar to my last piece of advice, which is just try to do it. I think a lot of, it's like the whole meme, right? Like Shia LaBeouf, like just do it. But like actually though, like I think that it's one of those things that for anything in life, I think that, just try to do it to whatever degree you can if you have time. Just try to dabble in it a bit just because I think that it's hard to sort of plan out your whole life around this thing if you've never even gotten a chance to like try it and see if you really like doing it or not. So I think that, yeah, just do it.
Um, I don't know like if this is like necessarily overlooked piece of advice, but like you do not have to push yourself to do really hard things all the time. Like the games industry is very like large. Like there's all of these different roles that you could go in. You don't have to force yourself to learn art or to learn code if you really don't want to, because there is always going to be lawyers that they need. There's always going to be writers. Like there are software that you can use that you don't have to like do a lot of coding, like RenPy and Twine and Bitsy and things like that. And I feel like it's very good to just show off what you're really good at and what makes you happy when it comes to making games. And if, you know, if you like coding and stuff, that's cool too. Just like, again, what Joshua said, just do it. But like, again, if it's like a game that you want to make, it doesn't have to be like, oh, this is my final piece. It needs to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's good to make mistakes because you learn from them. I think that's the best part to best way to put it.
Yeah, +1 to everything that was said. And yeah, I think game development is ultimately like a very creative industry, and it's still kind of new, and there's not a set trajectory for your career, and it's an artistic career, so it's not like as like stable or easy to navigate as some other careers out there. So at the end of the day, like all other creative unstable careers, it takes courage to just kind of decide one day that you're going to do it. So if you decide that that's a genuine passion you have that you want to explore, I think there's nothing really left to do but just start, which is frankly the hardest step. So yeah, I mean, if you really want to do it, then join a game jam, like start learning some skills, make your own little projects, using a free codeless software, and just kind of go off of that. So yeah, I think that's the most important thing. Yep. And also I would recommend really taking advantage of your time in college to find people that you might want to work with in the future. All of the people I work with currently have been college friends, and yeah, they're great. And I think it's actually quite similar for a lot of other people too. So definitely take advantage of your college years.
Yeah, I think all the advice that you guys gave was really good, especially like that idea of just doing it and just like not thinking too much over it. So yeah, thank you for all of the advice that you guys gave so far. And now we're gonna open it up to any questions that anyone might have. So you can feel free to unmute your mic or leave anything in the chat, and then we can read over them, or me and Marcus or Ethan can read over them, and we can chat about it.
I got a quick question for you guys. Like you said, Joshua and Geneva and Jeannie, when you guys mix work with passion, like where it's coding or animation, when you mix work and passion, how do you still keep the passion for whatever it is that make you want to start? Because there are ups and downs and trials that might make you feel like you're burnt out. How do you keep that passion going?
For myself, I've definitely taken breaks, and I keep coming back to it, but it's like a really, really great thing, just game jams. So I had worked on actually a game development project for about 1.5 years with a team of 10. But by the end of it, I was feeling pretty burnt out. And so I stopped and just did like a couple of game jams. And that was really fun. That was incredibly fun, and kind of reminded me again of like why I like to do this so much. And so take breaks. There's actually a really, really amazing indie game called A Short Hike. It's, as its name suggests, very short. Recommend it. But the creator actually made it as a side project as he was working on his like main thing, and he was getting really burnt out and tired of his main thing, so he decided, I'm just going to work on a smaller thing, and that actually became really successful. And so I think there's a lot of benefits in just taking creative breaks and just deciding, okay, well, I'm tired, so I'm going to work on something that will take literally 1 week or like a month. And I think that is a really great way to just like rejuvenate and remember again like why you like this. So yeah, that's a tip that I would give.
Yeah, I personally think for me, because like I enjoy different parts of game development, at first I would be like, okay, I'm getting tired of coding, so I'm going to move to the art, and okay, I'm getting tired of the art, I'm going to move to the writing. But I got particularly burnt out like sophomore, junior year of college, because I was working and doing school, which is very tiring. If you can avoid it, try to avoid it. Like internships, good, but like working all the way through college, I would not recommend it. But I feel like the way that I stopped being burnt out was after I graduated. I was only just focusing on just one job, not doing any side projects. Like doing side projects is good too, but I was like personally focusing on my hobbies, being like, okay, I'm gonna get back into reading, I'm gonna get back into roller skating, I'm gonna like slowly start drawing, but not push myself to draw to like posts on social media or to like improve, but just to do it for myself. So it's a lot of just like doing things for yourself, and even like what Jeannie was saying about like making like a small project that will not take a while. That's again just kind of trying to focus on doing something small but for yourself. Because I ended up doing a game jam earlier this year, and I was like, wow, I forgot I like doing this so much. So yeah, making sure that you're just taking those creative breaks.
Yeah, sort of similar to what Geneva and Jeannie said. I think that it's important to kind of vary up what you're doing. I think if you go 100% into a thing for a long period of time, you'll probably get tired of it at some point. And so I think that it's good to have other things that you enjoy doing as well. So like I've been trying to pick up ukulele, I do the language learning stuff. I also build drones occasionally as well. So that's something that's like somewhat related to like coding and stuff, but like a little bit different. So it's a good kind of break from that. And I think that in terms of like doing something over and over and over again, because it is a lot of like just nights and time of just like doing the same thing. I think that what helps is just feeling like, hey, look, like, I'm making progress on this thing. I'm, this much more closer to getting towards my goal than like last week or something. And so just being able to appreciate the small wins, I think, is also important.
I also have a question. Is that okay? So I've been trying to do game development for about a year now, but like every time I do it, I get in the momentum, and then like a volleyball tournament happens or a robotics tournament happens, and so I skip it for like a week or two. And then when I come back to my game project, I don't remember anything. So like how do you guys like I guess how do you guys deal with that, I guess?
I guess like I have a lot of sticky notes. So I leave kind of like little notes for myself, or like I have like a book dedicated to like, okay, this is just specifically game development stuff, so that I can try to remember what I was doing last. Or like sometimes like if I have like a part of the build ready already, I just play through it just to get myself refamiliar what I was working on, and I'm like, oh yeah, I was fixing this thing. So I feel like that can help. And also I've recently been using this thing called, I think it's Anki. Yeah, like specifically when it comes to like coding and like learning like best practices. Yeah, Anki. But I've been using that to try and like do basically like flashcards of being like, okay, this is what like the specific syntax is for like JavaScript and other things like that. So it's like technically kind of quizzing yourself, technically kind of just like treating it like a class, but you don't have to necessarily. It's more just like, especially if you're doing code, leave comments for yourself, leave lots of comments. It's not bad to do. So that's kind of how I kind of help remember that stuff.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I have to hop off in about 3 minutes, so I just wanted to quickly jump in. I use Notion pretty extensively. My entire life is on Notion, and did the to-do lists, and I really utilize the details function in the Notion, where I can like it's actually kind of it looks insane, but I kind of keep like daily to-dos of like what I've done and then what I need to do, and then I literally follow up with myself. And if I forget to do something, I move it to a day where I know I'll have time, and I just keep moving it until I do it. So similar in how I sometimes chase down other people to get their responses, I chase down myself as well. So I use Notion. And in terms of, I guess, like skill refresh, I find with art, that's just something like a muscle memory that you have to practice. So I just kind of try to do it as much as possible, or like kind of warm up for a few days before I like really get back into it. So that's how I go about it. Yeah.
Awesome. I was just going to say +1 to the Anki thing that Geneva said, since I use that a lot for language memorization as well. I find it really useful for all sorts of stuff. But yeah, it's sort of a little bit different, but I think that there's this idea of like motivation versus discipline. And I think a lot of people kind of wait for this feeling of motivation to get started on something. And if it's something that you really want to do, I think that it's one of those things that you do have to power through to some extent. I think of it as sort of like a car. You have like the ignition or turning the key is like the motivation, and like the gas is like your discipline. Like I think a lot of people, like on New Year's Eve, they feel really motivated to try to do something, go to the gym or something, right? So they have all this motivation, so they're turning the key a lot or whatever, and they go to the gym, you know, like really like a lot for like the first 2 weeks. But I feel like they tend to kind of putter out over time. So I think one thing that's important is having the discipline to be able to keep going back to it over time. And I think it's better to sort of be consistent about it in the long run than just go like full throttle for like a week or two. And so if you can just do like a little bit every day or something like that, or, you know, at least once a week, even like just like saying like, hey, I at least opened up the project, I at least worked on it a little bit, you'd be surprised on how far take you. Like you can, I often try to just like kind of trick myself by being like, okay, I'm just going to work on this for 5 minutes, right? Like if I'm just feeling really tired, just work on it for 5 minutes. And usually by the time those 5 minutes are over, you're like into the flow of things and you can sort of get more done than you thought. So it can be hard to get back into a project after not doing it for a while, but I think that just try to do a little bit at a time and you'll get used to it, I think. And lots of comments.
Thank you, Jeannie, for talking with us. She's gonna hop off. I think she's off right now. Yeah, Joshua, your point you made about discipline and motivation, I really like that. Like, that's the way I like to think. I hate working off of motivation because I know I'm gonna burn myself out. So there's always a way I look to trick myself into getting to work, and then ended up working for like a far longer extension of time than I would have. Next, we had a question from Matthew. So he said that he started messing around with block-based extension for Unity, and he's gone farther with C++. But where is it? Oh, that wasn't a question. Never mind.
No worries, no worries. I think block-based coding can be definitely helpful for people who are kind of intimidated by the whole coding thing, for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like honestly, like despite it not being like, like you typing out code, it's still a game. So I think that still counts.
Yeah,
so
if the final
good.
product is fun to play, you got it. That's all you need.
Yeah.
I actually had a question for Geneva.
Oh.
I was curious about how you went about funding your Kickstarter for your game, and like, was it enough to actually like fund the project, or was it more like kind of like motivation for like just like kind of like working on it?
I think it's the problem with, because again, it wasn't even for me. It was for me. The money went to me. However, it was like the after school program I went to, because like they did it every year to be like, wow, we're doing a Kickstarter for our students or whatever. But the goal was $1,000. That is not like, and the problem was the scope was way too big for the funding. I didn't fully understand game development funding at the time. So a game of the size that I'm making should not be just $1,000 of funding. That would be like I'm making a cute like one button like phone game or something that's very small, very short, like a puzzle game or something. But this is like a multi-hour narrative experience. So yeah. The Kickstarter did get a lot of people to follow my game and to like know about me though, which was very interesting. So Kickstarters can help with building a following. However, you just gotta make sure that you give updates regularly.
I see. Gotcha. Yeah. I think that's really good to know. And yeah, I think that projects generally tend to be like game dev in general, I think is way more work than people think. And like even a simple idea can take an incredibly long amount of time, like a ridiculously long amount of time for a very simple concept. So I think that trying to figure that out is definitely a challenge for me. How are you planning to like go about like the monetization of your game?
I'm probably just gonna like make it just a commercial game, like just being like, all right, here's the price, pay for the game, and then that's it. Um, like I for a while, the reason why it's kind of taken so long is because one, I burnt out because I was doing school and work on top of the game. And two, I for a while I was very perfectionist about it. Like I was like, it needs to be perfect. It needs to be like what I want it, like how I see it in my head. And it wasn't turning out like that, and I'm fine with that. And I feel like some things that I've seen other indie developers say is just don't let the game you're working on be your last game. Like you will always make another game and that game will always be better. So it's okay if your first game isn't like perfect. And this isn't my first game, but it's going to be my first like mostly solo commercial game.
That's awesome. Well, I'll wish list it.
Thank you.
Jumping off of that, I also had a question about like, I know there's so many different components of game development. Like there's a story, there's a narrative, there's a character design, modeling, there's all these different things. So I was wondering like, how do you like organize everything? Like I know that Jeannie was mentioning like Notion and she organizes like everything on Notion. So is there like a specific way that you manage your project or like a specific software to use?
Yes, it's a thing called Jira. So many, like Jira or Trello. I feel like those are the two main things that I've seen a lot in studios, but mainly Jira, because usually there is the producer who's the main person who's like, okay, I'm the person who's managing like the timeline. I'm making sure that people are getting assigned tasks that are going to get done to meet like goals for clients and things like that. I don't know. I don't think Jira is free. I think it's like a paid thing. But Trello is basically kind of the same to that. You can kind of format it the same because basically each task is given points, and like the larger the points are like, oh, it's going to take a while, and the smaller the points is like, oh, I'm just changing one line of code or whatever, or I'm just like drawing a very small logo. So I think that's usually how it gets managed in studios like that.
I don't have too much to say on this since I don't think that I'm a particularly organized person. Most of it is just sort of figuring out what needs to be done next by like just playing the game, like work on a part, play the game, be like, okay, this looks weird, work on this, play the game, work on this. Oh, that looks weird. Something, a lot of scratch paper, just like scribbles and notes and things. So I think I work better with like tactile, hands-on stuff. So that's what works for me. I don't know. I think maybe if you have a certain system for like maybe your studies or something that you're used to, maybe that could work too for game dev stuff as well.
Yeah, I think the experimentation part, just like doing it over and over again till you know, like, is this going to work? Is this not going to work? I think that's also very important. Jumping off of that, so when you're kind of like learning, like for example, like there's a lot of different things I have to learn in terms of like game development, like coding and things like that. So how did you approach like learning? Did you take like a specific course, or I know Joshua said that you kind of do like a test run, see like if it works or not. So do you do it like while you're doing it? You just kind of like search it up, or do you have like a specific course or a YouTube channel that you would recommend us take?
Yeah, I mean, for me, most of the things that I do are just self-taught. So, and what that self-taught really means is just looking up stuff on YouTube and Googling it. So literally step one, Google, how do I make a game? Or like, what is a game engine or something? There are lots of YouTube tutorials. You just look up like video game tutorial, how to make or something. And there are different tutorials out there. I think the ones that I started off with was this guy called Brackeys. He's pretty famous in the game dev space. I would say, only warning about that is that I think it's good if you make something simple to begin with. It's a little bit challenging if your initial idea is like something kind of complicated, because for me, I wanted to do the like whole like, oh, like spin on this thing and like try to do these different concepts. And a lot of the tutorials are not going to be like how to make this very specific thing you want to make. They're going to be like how to make a side scroller, how to make Mario, how to make, Pong or Pac-Man or something. And so I think that in the beginning, it's sort of like language, actually. I didn't even think about this, but my same approach with language is like learning the fundamental things like grammar. And then from there, you kind of learn to specialize based off of what kinds of things you want to talk about. So I guess sort of in the same way with game development, you through the tutorials, you can learn how things work, like how do components work in Unity, how do scripts work, or how do classes and objects and things like that work. And once you know the fundamentals there, you can kind of customize it more to be what you want. A big thing for me was going from the switch from tutorials to API. That was really big. Is that the tutorials tell you like how things work, and the API, for those who don't know, is sort of just like kind of like a user manual for like different code like functions and things. And so you can like look up like, how do I measure the distance from this point to that point, or how do I get it to do this? And so once I realized that the tutorials weren't cutting it in terms of what I wanted to do, I had to start learning how to like read the user manual basically and figure out, okay, how can I like, jury rig this to like work how I want it to. So I think start from tutorials, just YouTube, just follow along. And then once you have something more complicated, try to look into like more specifics and just Google stuff.
Yeah, definitely what Joshua said. And besides Brackeys, because I was like trying to remember, and I was like, yeah, Brackeys, I think, stopped making YouTube videos. And I feel like a lot of people were sad about that. But there's also Game Maker's Toolkit. But also there's surprisingly like a lot of like in-person and online like things for like specifically getting into game development. Like I know there's Grow Make Games. I know there's the thing called Code Coven. I know that I don't know how many like states that they do this, but there's this competition called the Games for Change Student Challenge. So it's like open to all high schoolers. I think applications are still open. I feel like it's like a good competition to apply to, and it's good because like they usually give you game development resources, or you get to meet people and whatnot. But I think that because they're pushing for more students to learn about game design, they have a lot of teachers learn and like teach their students these things. Usually I don't think it's always Unity, and it's usually like Scratch and things like that, but I still think it's good to look up. I'll like put links in the chat. But yeah, lots of YouTube, lots of probably Unity forums. Like I don't know if there's a lot of like game dev discords out there, but I'm sure that like, just learning with other people to hold yourself accountable can be very good. But yeah, like specifically for me, I started learning because there were just after school programs that I went to that were free, and also YouTube, Googling, things like that. And I think specifically for people interested in programming, I would say just like learning a lot about object-oriented programming and like the best practices when it comes to coding can be very helpful, because a lot of game development tutorials are usually like, all right, we're doing this thing, but it's like once you get past like makes things work, you got to learn how to make it clean, because I feel like that's what a lot of studios look for. It's like, okay, can you do this but like clean so that it doesn't like break the console, or it doesn't like I don't know, so that the game size isn't like a bajillion gigabytes and things like that. So it's like it's helpful to do that, but also baby steps, like start with the beginning and then get further to getting your code cleaner, because it doesn't have to be clean at the start.
Yeah, if you're someone who like sort of has a hard time with like starting things, I think like what Jeannie was doing a lot of, which was those game jams. I think those can be good for like, because I know some people, I personally don't struggle with it too much, but I have some friends who are really like, they everything like they need a deadline, otherwise they like won't work on something. And so I think game jams are a good way to do that, because it's like you get like 2 days, that's it. So like if you one of those people that like waits until the last minute and then you get superpowers and just like do all this stuff like all at once, I think that game jams can be helpful, since it gives you sort of like an artificial deadline to like be like, okay, you got to work on this like now. I think.
I think one more thing that I just want to add, I'm going to add a link to itch.io's game jams. I feel like itch.io is an amazing site where you can like upload your games for free, but also they have a lot of game jams that don't have to be 72 hours if you think you might need more time. There's some that last for a month or just a week. Like I know every summer that they do a game jam called My First Game Jam, which is like, so it's very like low stress, very chill. So I would like definitely look into that. But it's probably like at least My First Game Jam might not be up yet just because it's not the summer yet. But yeah, definitely like look into all of those.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of like famous games actually came from game jams initially. Like there's this one, I think it's called Baba Is You. But I recall that that one came from a game jam idea and just, you know, one of those things that like the end of the game jam doesn't have to be the end of the game. You know, you can still work on it after that point. And so it's just a good way to get your like creative juices flowing.
Yeah, Hollow Knight also started as a game
Oh,
jam.
really?
Yep.
Okay.
And apparently people did like it was called Hungry Night and people really didn't like it. But they, you know, you iterate it, you think about like what works and what didn't work, and then bam, sometimes you get a really good game.
Yeah, yeah. I remember there's a game called Celeste, that's sort of similar. I don't know, I actually don't know the history of this one, but I remember that there was like an initial version of Celeste and then like the
Yeah.
real version.
Yeah, the initial version was made in an engine called Pico 8, so it's more of like a fantasy game engine where it's like, oh, what it's like to make a game where you have a limited amount of lines and colors and music that you can put in. But it's still online for free. The Celeste Classic, I think.
Classic, yeah.
Yeah.
I should know this. I speedrun that game. Yeah. Oh, Geneva, do you want to put the link to your game or like your blog? I
Oh.
don't know. Do you have a blog or something that you post about your game updates?
Not yet. I have been so bad at like I can like post my Steam page, but yeah, I'm eventually going to like start doing like the social media push because I'm putting out a new demo this month. But
Ooh,
yeah, I need to get the motivation to do that. Well, not even the motivation. I need to sit down and do it because it's like it's ready.
I'll do the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say like having an audience is like a big thing too, I think, especially for like smaller game devs. I really don't know how people do it without
Yeah.
that. I think that it's definitely challenging.
Yeah, like a thing that is very nice when again you have a community that you can like talk to and rely on is that sometimes they'll tell you it's okay that you're taking too long. Because like I just kept being like, I need to get this game out, I need to get this game out. But being a person, and again, your health is important.
Yeah.
Like this should not be your last game.
Yeah. And it probably will be if you're super stressed about it and just like it's a terrible experience, right?
Yeah. So yeah.
Sort of that thing about like better do it in steps over the long run than like super crazy mode for a bit and just although that's the thing is that like crunch time. Like what's your thoughts? I don't know if you've experienced that at all at places you worked, but
fortunately not. That's I'm very, very lucky. The places I've worked at so far have been pretty nice. But also they are very indie, like very small teams. So hopefully none of you have to experience crunch.
I had to experience a little bit, even though it's like my own project, because I was going to the thing in Taiwan and all of that, and I wanted to get my game out there before I left for that. And so it was sort of like a deadline where it's like, oh, okay, all right, well, plane ticket is now, so I gotta, you know, figure this out. And so I did have to go through that a little bit. And yeah, I mean, I think it was okay though for me. It wasn't crazy. I just had to like, I guess it helped keep things in perspective because the game project had already lasted like 2 years and like there were like all these features I still wanted to add in, but it helped me like cut away stuff. Just be like, all right, just get the fundamental stuff out there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
Because that's a big challenge with game dev, I think, is that you have all this creative freedom and you have all these ideas you want to do, right? Like it's like, oh, I could do this and do that. But yeah, it takes time. So
yeah, sure does. Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of the audience thing, yeah, I found it really helpful to just like it was nice that I was already making YouTube videos, so it was sort of like I didn't have to like think about too much. It's like, oh, let me just make a video about it, and then
Yep. See, that's the easy part of it. Yeah. I feel like surprisingly enough, like TikTok has been very good for like getting game dev stuff out there. Like I haven't used it yet. I made like a few TikToks like a year or two ago just for funsies, and it got like a lot of views and likes. And I was like, who are you people? But again, so like you can easily kind of find like a game dev community on TikTok too. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
looking into that. I mean, I think it's crazy the marketing stuff is how efficient it can be with TikTok and things. I have some friends who have done that and they've gotten so many eyeballs on their product or whatever just from that. It's really amazing.
Geneva, have you thought of making it your own devlog?
I technically have made like a couple, like, yeah, no, I started being like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do a devlog. I'm gonna like update it every time I like have my updates. Um, and then I kind of just gave up. That's the problem. So I have done devlogs for different games multiple times. Like devlogs were like a thing I had to do for a class too. But specifically for Skate and Date, I think because I probably will do devlogs once like I start posting and stuff more, but because I've been so radio silent because I've been healing from college. I don't know. I think devlogs are very, very helpful. Like again, like I don't know how much on Tumblr they're helpful at the moment. Like I don't know the perfect place. I know itch.io supports devlogs, but it can be very good to just like update your followers and then they'll be like, hey, look at this cool thing, you know? But yeah.
When you say devlog, is that as in devlog as in like updates, or vlog as in like video?
Oh no, like dev blog.
Vlog. Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Yeah, I have not done like video blogs.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I was going to say you have like a dev video class. Like that sounds really cool.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're a little short on time, so I think we might have to end it here. But thank you guys so much.
Yeah. No
Yeah,
worries.
thanks
Thank
for
you for
having
having
us.
us. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great time. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I can
Yeah.
put that in the chat again. I'm always happy to answer questions for anyone who wants to look more into all that. Oh wait, that's the wrong link.
Oh. So
Let me see.
Oh yeah, and we're also gonna send everyone an email with all of like the information that you mentioned, so they'll
Oh,
have
okay.
access
We'll
to like
just do that
everything that
then.
you mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you guys for joining the webinar. I think the Zoom meeting is about to end soon, so you guys can just leave. And thank you so much, Joshua and Geneva.
Yeah, of course.
Of
Take
course,
care.
of course.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.